Bret, if you were in 100% top shape, who would you most like to get in the ring with and feud from today's WWE roster, and why?
Well, the guy I would love to work with the most would be Cena. I would love to have wrestled him, and it could never happen. Just so everyone knows, but it could never happen. But ideally, he would have been a great, and Steve would appreciate this. The villain, the heel character that I sort of became in '97, that Bret Hart, the one that was bashing Canada and with the Canadian flag and had the attitude and all that same character against John Cena today would be a great, if you could morph them together, that would have been a great match. I think I would have really, I would have had some great psychology and great way to tell a story, and Cena was the great, perfect hero to go against, that Hitman character from that era. I would love to have done that. And in saying that, and it's sort of the same thing as what happened with me and you. When I think of when you and I worked, Steve, that was the beauty of it, that the wrestling was going through this change, and they started liking the badasses, and the guys like John Cena, they're starting to get tired of cheering for the same old sort of, the guy that's number one baby face of the company kind of thing. It's like, you know what, we're not buying this guy, and we're gonna go against the grain. And it was a whole transition that's never been, I don't think anyone could understand how hard it was. You never sometimes knew what you were going to happen to go to certain towns, and no matter how bad you get, they cheer for you, and no matter how good you try to be, they boo you. And that whole period, and how we sort of switch places, and sort of, I always tell people, you want to understand great working and great psychology and two wrestlers appreciating the circumstances, that what's happening in the business around them, and how to sort of, I think it's a really, it was such a great time. I mean, I know we've talked a lot of times about that match, but I really think there was some great art being made that's they'll never duplicate that art, the artistry that came from that time period. It was really, it's amazing, because I know that in Survivor Series when we fought, you and I, we tried so hard to make that the greatest match of all time. Like, we really gave our all for that. So when it was over, it was like that. We did everything. We did everything we could think of, every move, every bang, I thought we took it to the edge. And then all of a sudden, the way I remember when we got worked at WrestleMania 13, it was kind of last minute, and kind of like, okay, well, we'll just slap Bret Hart and Steve Austin together again. They got kind of a building thing going, and it's like, yeah, but we just worked a month ago kind of thing. It's like, well, you're going to work again. And it's like, we're going to make it a no-holds-barred match. And, I remember at the time thinking no-holds-barred, that takes out pinfalls. So that makes it even more boring and more harder. We're not going to have the same, and I remember thinking of the match I had with Bob Backlund, the I Quit match, which I thought was my only really disaster match I ever had. But anyway, so I don't think anyone ever realized, I know I didn't, that that would be such a great match. I think going into it, I thought it was going to be awful hard to come up and try to duplicate what we had already done before.
Well, when you're talking about that match and us going back together so soon, I just injured my knee. I was in San Antonio. I was off. It was about 2 or 3 weeks before WrestleMania 13, and I was at home watching Monday Night Raw when Vince made the announcement that in a submission match in the semi-main would be Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret the Hitman Hart. I was watching TV. I am in the match. I just found out about it. The submission match totally pissed me off because, I didn't have a whole arsenal of offensive moves anyway, and I damn sure didn't have any submission moves, maybe one. So I was petrified and mortified and pissed off. Of course, I hadn't been in the company really long enough for them to consult me or ask if it was okay if they booked me in a match, but I was hotter than a sumbitch. And I don't want to talk too much about WrestleMania 13 or any of our matches, because I want you to come back and I want to spend a total show on those, because I want to discuss certain segments of time that people can go back and reference as we pick through those matches. But your answer about John Cena and working with him, I totally see that. But also, I love the heel aspect of Bret the Hitman Hart from way back in that '86 match with Ricky Steamboat. And I think Steamboat had actually requested to work with you. Was that true?
I don't know.
Do you remember the match I'm talking about, though?
The match that you're talking about was we got news that we were working at WrestleMania.
Correct.
And they booked us in Boston, and they booked us in Washington, D.C. to sort of get comfortable with each other, get familiar with each other. And so the match that you watched was the very first match we ever had. But that night in the dressing room before that match, they came in and said the match got scrubbed. They told me I was in the Battle Royal now, and that the Steamboat match was going to be Hercules and Steamboat, which in the end probably was better because Hercules ended up doing a match with him about 30 seconds long, which jobbed out to him, and that wasn't even worth the trouble. I would have hated doing that.
But if you
switched it.
But if you go back, anybody on YouTube to watch this match, that was 1986. Was that in Boston?
That was in Boston. The beauty of that match is that we never worked with each other before. And
that thing was a thing of beauty. It's seamless. It's so snug, and the timing is there. And that would have been Steamboat versus Bret Hart in Boston in '86. Catch that on YouTube. And you kind of brushed upon the next question sent in from Marcy, and here it is. And since you brought up my name, what was it that you saw in Steve Austin that you knew you wanted to work with him and give him the rub he needed?
Without going to a big long, blowing a lot of smoke up your ass kind of thing. I mean, the truth is, I remember going to Vince when you were stunning Steve and going, why is this guy not here? Vince was going, we don't have any. Vince's office said, we don't have anybody for you to work with. I go, why don't you get Steve Austin? Because I used to bring your name up a lot. And I used to bring up Benoit's name a lot, and there's certain guys in WCW that I used to bring up their names. Why don't you bring these guys in? They're free now. They're not working for him anymore. And Vince would always think about it, but you never see him bring him in. And all of a sudden, one day there was Steve, and it was like, finally. I even told Steve that story when he first said, I've been asking him to bring you in for like 2 years now. And I was a big fan of Steve's before he got to WWE, and and I always tell people that tell me, they go, you made Steve Austin and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, that's not true.
No, but you were a big part of the making process, and I'll never forget that. And you got to call a spade a spade. Would I have been okay without you? Yeah, most likely. But that you can't take that. You just can't take that component out of my career. You were already the hitman. You'd already established greatness, and you would continue to go down the road that you did. You were already a made guy. Feuding with you and you handpicking me for that match in Madison Square Garden. And I remember I told this story with Sean when he first came on the show back in the day, that we were in Houston. It was at the Houston Summit. I'd wrestled Sean in about a mid-card match, and you had watched the match. And I remember you came up to me afterwards, and you said, hey, man, that was a good match. And you said, I'll work with you any day. And so you were a big part of helping make me. And sometimes people don't understand the rub process. Certain things have to happen correctly during some time to get people over. Guys don't get over just because they're over. It's a whole process of going through the process. So working with you was, imperative for my career to end up the way it did. And with the feuds and the storylines, you couldn't have scripted a better story from really start to finish of the stuff that we did.
I just remember a lot of the the stuff. I think you used to sometimes say the odd comment about my dad. But old man Hardy down in his basement or whatever it is, he'd say something about him. It would light up my dad so much he'd get a big smile on his face. He would love it, and I was like, we had such good promos, considering we were two guys that really got along pretty good. But our promos, I think, whenever I watch them, I go, I was really in my zone. Like we seemed to understand each other's characters perfectly, how to always make each other's characters and keep pushing, and I like it. When I look back to those days and the promos I was doing with you, I think they were, and yours in particular, was like you were ahead of your time. There, you were just getting your just getting familiar with where you were going, and I always tell people, and this is true, that once I left WWE, I wasn't really a fan of wrestling so much. I tried not to watch the show and that. The only guy I watched was you. I always love all the stuff you did. Even with Vince, I'd shake my head and go, "Yeah, I love it. That's good shit." Damn. I was like the only character that to me that really went back to my childhood of what a wrestling villain. But I think there's even a couple of Bugs Bunny cartoons where they had a wrestler that would look a lot like what your gimmick was. The muscle, the look, the whole thing. You just, you were always, we always had a good chemistry together in the ring too. I do remember you working with Sean all over the place in Texas, in little towns, and I don't even remember the names of some of them, but I do remember kind of peeking over like barn doors and stuff like that to watch you work and coming back and saying, "Yeah, I want to work with you sometime." And and then whenever we did work, I think we always where we worked well. I know. I think that what I did for you a lot of the time was, I think you wouldn't, if it's fair to me to say, I think when you first got to WWE or when you first got to start working with me, you were still a little, you kind of you'd spit out of control sometimes. Like you got going too fast. You end up somewhere where you didn't know where you were in the match. And I think I was good at kind of teaching you to calm down, relax. It's not the whole match isn't screwed up. We'll just go back to this part. Now we'll pick it up again. And I think I really taught you how to pace yourself better and just take your time. And I noticed it years later. It's like, yeah, you can tell like how much you've improved. Like from the time period when you first worked with me in say Survivor Series, to even when you worked with me at WrestleMania 13. The timing and the understanding of how we worked, and really that was just two guys mostly playing off instincts of each other's characters, and it's like I love how we started it. I love how we duked it out all the way through. I always think that's what this whole business is about. Is what we did in that match is that's the greatest art of pro wrestling that I could think of.
But, when I go back and watch stuff and I'm just so hypercritical of anything that I see or do, and in picking apart the current product, I mean, I don't mince words. It is what it is. And I'm just passionate about the business. I was watching part of that match last night. You had hit me in the corner. I was hanging from the turnbuckle with both arms. You spun me around, and that was when you started giving me those big haymakers, and I kicked you right in the balls, and you went down. I started using the ropes to pull myself up, and the match continued. But when I was watching that last night, I was thinking, golly, you could have stayed down another 30 seconds. 30 real seconds. I could have, is who I'm referring to. Then started pulling up those ropes. And we had that crowd right in the palm of our hands. But that was just the greatest natural double down that could have happened, and it was. And when I look back and nitpick it, I should have stayed down for 30 seconds. That's what I think.
I always tell people, like when I fought Bulldog in Wembley, and it was like I remember going through the whole match with Davey, and it was a long story about the match, but I remember at the very end I told Davey, I said, make sure you, when we get up at the end, I said, I'm not going to shake your hand. I'm going to make like I'm a poor sport. I'm going to keep making out I'm going to leave, but just keep giving me that, just keep staring at me like, come on, you're my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Come on, I beat you fair and square, and I'm offering my hand. Just keep looking at me with the big puppy dog eyes, and I'll just keep getting like I'm going to leave, like fuck you kind of thing. And I told her, I said, we'll have that place. We can have that place. I'll have that 82,000 ready to start crying if we do it right. And you know what? I remember it's a little thing, but whenever I watch that match, I go, I couldn't get Davey to look me in the eye. Every time he did, he turned. He started trying to work the crowd.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, "You idiot! The drama is with me.
Right.
With me. Look at me. Don't look at the crowd. Don't look at Diana. Don't." And he kept. And I remember you'd see me, I just finally throw my hands up and I just walk over and I hugged him because it was like he forgot.
Right.
Never did get it, and it was like one of those things that I can just tell you, when you watch that show bash, and as much great as that match is, it's the little details. And another thing that I do remember is when when you and I worked, that we always had good chemistry. We always got along very good in the ring, and I don't think we ever didn't have good chemistry in the ring. Even on that DVD that just came out, they have me and you working in South Africa. And I don't know if you've seen that back in a while.
I haven't seen that. I remember that match. I thought it could have been better, but I remember one time, and I did enjoy that match in South Africa. I think I was a little blown up from the travel schedule, but one time we were working in Kuwait, and I think we worked a string of shows together there. And you and I were always, are you laughing? And you might know the story I'm about to tell. We're always dead serious in the ring. And for the first few years when I was in the business, I mean, I didn't think you could smile. I didn't think you were supposed to have fun. I just thought you were supposed to wrestle. And me in a competitive environment, man, I have killer instinct. I'm just out there to compete. Well, hello. Finally, I learned how to relax a little bit and to loosen up a little bit and have fun out there. And when you're having fun, the people are having a good time. And it doesn't matter how serious the angle is. It's just you being you and in the moment, whether you're heel or babyface. Doesn't mean you have to smile. You're just having fun. And so I was out there playing a little bit of Gaga that night, and I was trying to get, who was the referee in that match? I said, I bet I can get Bret to crack. And that's when I started flapping my wings like a chicken. And you barely laughed, and you always used the back of your hand and your hair to cover up your smile. And I almost busted you. Do you remember that?
I do remember a match with me. I do sort of remember that. I remember maybe it was the same week or same day. I think it was a 3-day trip. So I remember Owen being in a match with, and maybe you were in it, maybe you weren't, but I remember whoever was in it with me, he was all hijinks, and he was pretending to smoke while he had guys in head scissors. And he was pulling all his shtick out, all his funny little gags where he's taking the funny bumps, and he'd call high spots that were impossible to do. And I just remember laughing on the apron so hard. I think the hardest I've ever laughed in the ring was in that match. And it's not very often that you get a chance to, like you said, to laugh every now and then. But I remember with Kurt Hennig, I always had a spot where he'd call some kind of a duck the elbow cross body, and then underneath he'd kick out, and I'd roll under the rope, and we go into a big series of high spots after that. But I remember the first time we did it, I dived a little early, and he was a little too far back, and anyway, I ended up kind of hitting him around the shoelaces with a big crossbody, and we both started laughing. And it was like, and I think the match turned out to be not one of our best matches anyway. So that was the very first time we worked, and we always laughed about doing that spot. So that every time we did work, we did it like that anyway. And we would always kick out. He'd kick out, and I'd be laughing my head off under the bottom rope, and I'd come up and I'd hit him with a tackle, and I'd go through all these high spots where he's bumping and taking arm drags, and I'm coming up and hip tossing him, and it was a lot of complicated stuff, and I'm laughing all the way through it. So I took him over in the headlock, and I'm lying there panting in the ring, just catching my breath, and we'd both be just laughing our heads off. And it was fun out there sometimes. It wasn't always what people think it is.